The last rays of sunset streamed through the dusty windows of the Coyote Saloon as Emma Foster clutched her wedding dress close to her chest, her back pressed against the bar. 5 men surrounded her, their faces twisted with malicious intent, eyes gleaming with something that made her stomach churn. Emma had been a bride for less than 6 hours, and now she was alone, cornered like a rabbit surrounded by wolves. "Ain't she a pretty little thing?" drawled a man with a scar running down his left cheek. "Too pretty to be wandering around these parts alone." "Please," Emma whispered, her voice trembling. "My husband will be here any moment." The men laughed, a sound that sent chills down her spine. "Funny thing about that," said another, taking a step closer. "Word is your groom left you at the altar, rode out of town faster than a spooked Mustang." Emma fought back tears. They were right. Xavier Zimmerman, the man she'd agreed to marry through a mail-order arrangement, had taken one look at her when she'd arrived on the stage and promptly disappeared. But these men didn't need to know the whole truth. "He'll be back," she insisted, even as her hope dwindled. The saloon doors swung open with a bang, silhouetting a tall figure against the crimson sky. The man stepped inside, spurs jingling with each deliberate step. His face was partially hidden beneath the brim of a black Stetson, but Emma could see the hard line of his jaw, the intensity in his eyes as they swept across the room and landed on her. In one fluid motion, he drew his revolver, the metallic sound cutting through the tension like a knife. "She's mine alone," he declared, his voice as steady as his aim. "Step away from her, gentlemen, unless you're hankering to meet your maker today." Emma's breath caught in her throat. She had never seen this man before in her life. The stranger's declaration hung in the air like gunsmoke. The men surrounding Emma exchanged uncertain glances, weighing their odds against the newcomer's unwavering stance. The saloon had fallen eerily quiet, the piano player's fingers frozen above the keys, the bartender ducked low behind the counter. "Now hold on," said the scarred man, raising his hand slightly. "We were just having a friendly conversation with the lady." "Didn't look friendly from where I'm standing," the stranger replied, his gun never wavering. "And she doesn't seem to be enjoying your company." Emma studied her unexpected defender. Though his face remained partially shadowed beneath his hat, she could see he was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 25 or 26, with sharp features and eyes the color of a summer storm. A thin layer of trail dust covered his otherwise fine clothing, suggesting he'd been riding hard. "This ain't your business, cowboy," spat one of the men, his hand inching toward his holster. "I'm making it my business." The stranger took a step forward. "Miss Foster is under my protection." "That makes her my business." Emma startled at the sound of her name. How did this man know who she was? The standoff stretched for what felt like eternity, the only sound the creaking of floorboards and the distant howl of a coyote. Finally, the scarred man shrugged and gestured to his companions. "Come on, boys. Plenty of other entertainment in this town." As they shuffled toward the door, the last man turned with a sneer. "Enjoy your bride, mister. Mail-order wives are usually damaged goods anyway." The stranger's finger tightened on the trigger. "One more word and you'll be eating through a hole in your neck." The threat was effective. The men left, leaving behind only the lingering scent of whiskey and tobacco. When the doors swung shut, Emma let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. The stranger holstered his weapon and approached her with measured steps, as if afraid she might bolt like a frightened deer. "Are you hurt, Miss Foster?" he asked, his voice gentler now. "No, she stopped, studying him with suspicion. "How do you know my name?" "And what did you mean when you said I was yours?" He removed his hat, revealing thick, dark hair and a face that was handsome despite the weariness etched into it. "Name's Xander Zane. I work for the Pinkerton Detective Agency. I was hired to find you." "Find me?" Emma clutched her reticule tighter. "By whom?" "Your father," Xander replied, watching her reaction carefully. "He's been worried sick since you left Philadelphia." Emma felt her face flush with anger. "My father disowned me when I refused to marry the man he chose. He has no right to send someone after me now." "Be that as it may, I've been tracking you for 3 weeks." He glanced around the saloon, which was slowly returning to life as patrons realized the danger had passed. "Though I must say, finding you in a saloon in Timber Creek wasn't what I expected." "And what of your claim?" "You told those men I was yours." The accusation in her voice was unmistakable. A hint of color touched Xander's cheeks. "A necessary lie to ensure your safety, nothing more." Emma wasn't sure whether to be relieved or disappointed. "Well, Mr. Zane, you can tell my father that I'm perfectly fine and have no intention of returning to Philadelphia. My life is here now." Xander raised an eyebrow, taking in her wedding dress and the tears that had left tracks through the dust on her cheeks. "Here. Alone in a frontier town where you know no one. With a groom who apparently abandoned you," her chin lifted defiantly. "I'm resourceful." "I don't doubt it, Miss Foster," but the bartender approached, wiping his hands on a stained cloth. "Excuse me, madam, but if you ain't buying drinks, you can't stay. This ain't a ladies' establishment." Emma glanced around, suddenly aware of the curious stares from the predominantly male patrons. Reality came crashing down around her. She had no money, no home, and no prospects. Xavier Zimmerman had taken what little savings she'd brought with him when he fled. "I have a room at the hotel across the street," Xander said quietly. "You're welcome to use it while we figure out your situation." Emma hesitated. Going to a hotel room with a strange man was hardly proper, but her options were limited. "I give you my word as a gentleman that your virtue is safe with me," he added, seeing her uncertainty. "I'll sleep in the stables if necessary." There was something in his eyes, a steadiness, an honesty that made Emma want to trust him, or perhaps it was simply that she had nowhere else to turn. "Very well, Mr. Zane," she said finally. "I accept your offer, but only for tonight." Xander nodded, placing his hat back on his head and offering his arm. "Shall we, Miss Foster?" As they stepped out into the cool evening air, Emma couldn't help but wonder if she'd just made another terrible mistake or if, perhaps, her fortunes were finally changing. The hotel room was small but clean, with a single bed, a washstand, and a window overlooking the main street of Timber Creek. Emma stood awkwardly in the center, still clutching her belongings while Xander lit the oil lamp. "You must be hungry," he said, breaking the uncomfortable silence. "I can have the hotel bring up some food." "That would be kind, thank you." Emma set her reticule on the small table. "Mr. Zane, I must ask, how exactly did you find me?" Xander leaned against the doorframe, keeping a respectful distance. "It's my job to find people who don't want to be found, Miss Foster. You left a trail, train tickets, hotel registries, letters to your intended." "Letters that were clearly wasted," Emma muttered bitterly. "If I may ask, what happened with Mr. Zimmerman?" "Your father believed you were eloping with an unsuitable man, but clearly that's not the whole story." Emma sank onto the edge of the bed, suddenly exhausted. "We weren't eloping. I answered an advertisement for a mail-order bride. Xavier Zimmerman owned a cattle ranch outside of Timber Creek. We corresponded for 6 months." She laughed humorlessly. "He described himself as a gentleman rancher of considerable means. He said he needed a refined wife to help him establish himself in society. And when you arrived," he took one look at me stepping off the stagecoach, and his face changed. "He made some excuse about checking on my luggage and disappeared. I waited for hours before someone told me they'd seen him riding out of town." Emma smoothed a wrinkle in her wedding dress. The preacher was kind enough to let me stay at the church last night, but he had a funeral today and couldn't accommodate me further. So you went to the saloon. I thought perhaps I could find work as a serving girl. Emma felt her cheeks warm with embarrassment. I didn't realize what kind of establishment it was until those men surrounded me. Xander's expression darkened. You're fortunate I arrived when I did. Yes, quite the coincidence, Emma said, studying him. Or were you following me? I've been in town for 2 days, asking questions. When I heard about a mail-order bride left at the altar, I suspected it might be you. He straightened. I'll order that food now and give you some privacy to change. As he turned to leave, Emma called after him. Mr. Zane, thank you for what you did in the saloon. Regardless of your motives, you may have saved my life. He tipped his hat slightly. Get some rest, Miss Foster. We can discuss your options in the morning. After he left, Emma changed out of her wedding dress into her only other garment, a simple traveling dress that was wrinkled from being packed. She washed her face in the basin, trying to make sense of the day's events. When Xander returned with a tray of food, they ate in relative silence. True to his word, he left afterward, telling her he would sleep in the chair in the hotel lobby. Alone in the unfamiliar room, Emma stared at the ceiling. She had run from one undesirable marriage in Philadelphia only to find herself abandoned in a frontier town. And now a detective had been sent to bring her back to the very life she'd fled. Yet something about Xander Zane intrigued her. Unlike the men in the saloon, and unlike Xavier Zimmerman, he had treated her with respect. As she drifted off to sleep, Emma wondered what the morning would bring. Her father wanted her back in Philadelphia, but she had no desire to return. Perhaps there was a third option, one that didn't involve either going back to her old life or struggling alone in a new one. Morning light filtered through the thin curtains as Emma awoke to a knock at the door. She sat up quickly, disoriented for a moment before remembering where she was. Miss Foster, it's Xander Zane. I've brought breakfast. Emma hastily smoothed her hair. Just a moment, please. She splashed water on her face and pinched her cheeks for color before opening the door. Xander stood in the hallway, looking remarkably refreshed for a man who had spent the night in a lobby chair. He carried a tray with coffee, biscuits, and what smelled like bacon. I hope you slept well, he said, setting the tray on the small table. Better than expected, thank you. Emma accepted the cup of coffee he offered. Have you telegraphed my father yet? No. Xander sat across from her. I thought we might discuss that first. Emma studied him over the rim of her cup. You surprise me, Mr. Zane. I assumed you would be eager to complete your assignment. My assignment was to find you and ensure your safety. I've done that. He broke a biscuit in half. What happens next is not as straightforward. What do you mean? Your father hired me to find you, yes, but he also instructed me to use my judgment regarding your return. Xander met her gaze directly. If I determine you're in a stable situation and wish to remain where you are, I'm authorized to respect that decision. Emma set down her cup with a clatter. He said that, my father, after a fashion. He's worried about you, Miss Foster. He may not approve of your choices, but he wants to know you're safe. Hope fluttered in Emma's chest. Perhaps her father wasn't as unyielding as she'd believed, but the reality of her situation quickly dampened that hope. It hardly matters now. I have no money, no home, and no prospects. I can't stay in Timber Creek. What if you could? Xander leaned forward slightly. This is a growing town. They need teachers, seamstresses, shopkeepers. A woman of your education could find opportunities here. Perhaps, but I would need time and resources to establish myself. She shook her head. I have neither. Xander was quiet for a moment, seeming to consider something. I may have a proposition for you, Miss Foster, one that could solve both our problems. Emma raised an eyebrow, instantly wary. What sort of proposition? A temporary arrangement. I tell your father you're married and settled, satisfying my obligation to him. You gain time and financial support to establish yourself here in the West, away from Philadelphia society. And how exactly would this arrangement work? Emma asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. We marry. In name only, he added quickly, seeing her expression. I continue my work with the Pinkerton agency and you build a life here. After a suitable period, say 1 year, we quietly dissolve the marriage and go our separate ways. Emma stared at him, stunned by the audacity of his suggestion. You can't be serious. I'm entirely serious. Xander's expression was earnest. Think about it logically. You need time and protection. I need to complete my assignment without forcing you to return to a life you fled. This solution benefits us both. Marriage is not a business arrangement, Mr. Zane, isn't it? He countered. Your mail-order marriage was precisely that. And from what you've told me of Philadelphia society, marriages there are often more about alliances than affection. Emma couldn't argue with that point. Her father had tried to force her to marry Clarence Willoughby, a man 30 years her senior, simply because he owned a shipping company that would complement her father's railroads. What would prevent you from exercising husbandly rights? She asked bluntly. Xander's cheeks colored slightly, but his gaze remained steady. My word as a gentleman, this would be a marriage on paper only. We would maintain separate living arrangements once you're established. And if I refuse, then I escort you back to Philadelphia as my employer requested, or you stay here with no protection or resources. The choice is yours, Miss Foster. Emma rose from the table and walked to the window, looking out at the dusty main street of Timber Creek. Wagons rolled past, cowboys rode through town, and women in calico dresses carried baskets of goods. This world was so different from the manicured gardens and marble halls of Philadelphia, yet it called to her. Here, she could be more than just Henry Foster's daughter or some man's ornamental wife. 1 year, she said finally, turning back to face Xander. And we maintain separate quarters immediately, not just when I'm established. Xander nodded. That's agreeable. And I want it in writing. A contract stating the terms of our arrangement and guaranteeing the dissolution of our marriage after 1 year. I'll draw up the papers today, he agreed. Emma took a deep breath. Then, Mr. Zane, it seems we have an agreement. Please, if we're to be married, even in name only, you should call me Xander. Xander, Emma repeated, testing the name. And I'm Emma. He extended his hand formally, as if sealing a business deal. Pleased to make your acquaintance, Mrs. Zane. Emma placed her hand in his, expecting a handshake. Instead, he lifted it to his lips in a courtly gesture that sent an unexpected warmth through her chest. This arrangement was purely practical, she reminded herself firmly. There was no place for such reactions. Yet as she withdrew her hand, Emma couldn't help but wonder what she was getting herself into. The Timber Creek Courthouse was a modest building of weathered timber and glass windows. At 10 o'clock that morning, Emma found herself standing before a silver-haired justice of the peace, with Xander at her side and 2 court clerks as witnesses. She wore her traveling dress. Having refused to don her wedding gown again, that garment was now tucked away as a reminder of false promises. Do you, Xander Zane, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? The justice intoned. I do, Xander replied, his voice clear and steady. And do you, Emma Foster, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? Emma hesitated for just a heartbeat. I do. Then by the authority vested in me by the territory of Wyoming, I pronounce you husband and wife. The justice peered at them over his spectacles. You may kiss the bride." Emma hadn't considered this part of the ceremony. Her eyes widened slightly as Xander turned toward her. He seemed to sense her discomfort, for he simply leaned forward and pressed a chaste kiss to her cheek. "Thank you, Your Honor," Xander said, signing the marriage certificate with a flourish. Emma added her signature, watching as her maiden name was officially replaced. Outside the courthouse, the bright September sun made Emma squint. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now we find you suitable accommodations," Xander replied. "I've made inquiries about boarding houses in town." "So soon? We've only just married." "Our agreement was for separate quarters immediately," he reminded her. "Unless you've changed your mind." "No, of course not." Emma adjusted her bonnet. "I'm merely concerned about appearances. Won't it seem strange for a newly married couple to live apart?" Xander considered this. "You have a point. Perhaps we should maintain a shared residence for a few weeks, for propriety's sake. I can take a room at the hotel while you establish yourself here." They walked down the main street, an awkward distance between them. Emma was acutely aware of curious glances from townspeople. A woman in a general store doorway whispered behind her hand to another as they passed. "Word travels fast in small towns," Xander murmured. "They likely know you were to marry Zimmerman. Now you've turned up married to a stranger instead." "Let them talk," Emma said with more confidence than she felt. "I've endured worse scrutiny in Philadelphia drawing rooms." "Indeed." Xander looked at her with something like admiration. "You're stronger than you appear, Emma. Necessity breeds resilience, Mr. Xander." They stopped outside a small dress shop with a sign in the window advertising for help. Emma peered through the glass at the colorful fabrics and patterns inside. "Are you thinking of applying?" Xander asked. "Perhaps." "I'm an excellent seamstress, though my father considered it beneath me to actually use the skill professionally." Emma straightened her shoulders. "But first, I need suitable clothing. I can hardly make a good impression in a wrinkled traveling dress." "Of course." Xander reached into his coat and produced a leather wallet. "Consider this your first allowance as Mrs. Zane." Emma stared at the money he offered. "I don't want charity." "It's not charity, it's part of our arrangement." His expression softened slightly. "Think of it as an investment in your future independence, if that makes it easier to accept." After a moment's hesitation, Emma took the money. "I will repay you when I'm able." "As you wish." Xander tipped his hat. "I have some business to attend to at the telegraph office." "Shall I meet you back at the hotel for lunch?" "Yes, that would be fine." As he walked away, Emma took a deep breath and pushed open the door to the dress shop. A bell tinkled pleasantly, and a plump woman with graying hair looked up from a bolt of calico. "Good morning, dearie," she greeted warmly. "What can I help you with today?" "I need several new dresses," Emma replied, "and I was hoping to inquire about the position advertised in your window." The woman's eyebrows rose. "You're new in town, aren't you?" "Yes, I arrived recently." "My name is Emma Zane." The name felt strange on her tongue. Recognition dawned on the woman's face. "Oh, you're the mail-order bride who was left at the altar. But now you're Zayn, not Zimmerman?" Emma felt her cheeks warm. "Yes, well, circumstances changed." The woman bustled forward, extending her hand. "I'm Martha Wilson. I own this shop. And honey, don't you worry about explaining a thing. We all heard about that Zimmerman character. Ran off with half the money he owed in town, from what I understand. You're better off without him." "Thank you for your understanding, Mrs. Wilson. Now, about those dresses and that job." Martha looked her up and down appraisingly. "You say you can sew? Very well, actually. I was educated at Miss Pearson's Academy for Young Ladies in Philadelphia, where needlework was considered an essential skill." Martha's eyes widened. "Philadelphia? My word, you're a long way from home." "Home is where one makes it," Emma replied with a small smile. Indeed it is. Martha nodded decisively. Tell you what, show me what you can do with a needle and thread and we'll talk about that position. As for the dresses, I can help you with that right now. By the time Emma met Xander for lunch, she had ordered 3 new dresses to be ready within the week and had secured a trial position at Martha's shop, starting the following day. She felt lighter than she had in months, despite the strangeness of her situation. You look pleased, Xander commented as they sat at a small table in the hotel dining room. I've found employment at the dress shop, Emma told him. Mrs. Wilson has agreed to give me a chance, pending approval of my sewing skills. That's excellent news. Xander seemed genuinely happy for her. Did you also manage to order new clothing? Yes, though I was conservative with your money. Emma hesitated, then added, I also learned something about Xavier Zimmerman. Apparently, he left town owing money to several businesses. It seems I had a fortunate escape. Xander's expression darkened. Men like that prey on women's hopes. You deserved better. Did I send your telegram? Emma asked, changing the subject. Yes, I informed your father that you're safe and settled in Wyoming territory. He paused. I mentioned your marriage, though not the temporary nature of it. What did he say? I expect his reply tomorrow, though given the distance, it could be a few days. They fell into silence as their food arrived. Emma found herself studying Xander surreptitiously as he ate. He had striking features, a strong jaw, straight nose, and those intense gray eyes that seemed to see more than she wanted to reveal. Though they'd only just met, there was something compelling about him that went beyond his handsome appearance. Tell me about yourself, she said suddenly. If we're to maintain this charade, I should know something of my husband. Xander set down his fork. What would you like to know? Where are you from? Do you have family? How did you become a Pinkerton detective? I was born in Boston, he began. My father was a lawyer, my mother a teacher. Both died in a carriage accident when I was 17. I had no siblings or close relatives, so I made my own way after that. I'm sorry, Emma said softly. That must have been difficult. He shrugged slightly. It taught me self-reliance. I worked odd jobs, eventually became a city policeman in Chicago. The Pinkerton agency recruited me 3 years ago. I've been tracking missing persons ever since. And are they all as willing to be found as I was? Emma asked with a hint of irony. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. Not usually. Most are criminals or debtors. Finding a runaway society daughter was a pleasant change of pace. I'm not a runaway, Emma protested. I'm 22 years old. I made a choice to seek a different life. Of course. Xander inclined his head in acknowledgement. I meant no offense. Emma studied him for a moment longer. You're a difficult man to read, Xander Zane. Part of my professional training, he replied. But I promise you, what you see is largely what you get. I'm a simple man at heart. Somehow I doubt that, Emma murmured, but let the subject drop. After lunch, Xander escorted Emma to a small house at the edge of town. It was modest but well-maintained, with a small porch and a garden plot in the back. What's this? Emma asked as he opened the gate. I've arranged to rent it for the next month, Xander explained. It belongs to the widow Johnson, who's visiting her daughter in Denver. I thought it would be more comfortable than the hotel. Emma climbed the porch steps and peered through the window. The interior was simply furnished but clean and cozy. This is very thoughtful of you. There are 2 bedrooms, he added, as if anticipating her concern. Our arrangement remains as agreed. Emma nodded, oddly touched by his consideration. When can we move in? Now, if you wish. I've already paid the first month's rent. As they collected their few belongings from the hotel and settled into the little house, Emma found herself wondering about the strange twist her life had taken. 3 days ago, she had been preparing to marry a man she knew only through letters. Now she was legally wed to a man she barely knew at all, living in a rented house in a frontier town thousands of miles from her former home. Yet strangely, as she arranged her meager possessions in the smaller of the 2 bedrooms, Emma felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in years. This marriage might be a sham, but it had given her something precious: the freedom to forge her own path. Later that evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the western sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Emma glanced at Xander's profile. "Thank you," she said quietly. He turned to her, one eyebrow raised in question. "For giving me this chance," she clarified. "Most men in your position would have simply completed their assignment without concern for my wishes." "Most men haven't seen what I've seen," Xander replied, his gaze returning to the horizon. "Life is too short to be lived according to others' expectations." The depth of feeling in his voice surprised her. There was more to Xander Zane than the composed professional he presented to the world. Emma found herself curious about what lay beneath that carefully maintained exterior. As darkness fell over Timber Creek, she wondered what the coming days would bring, and whether this strange marriage of convenience might prove to be more complicated than either of them had anticipated. The next morning dawned clear and crisp, a hint of autumn in the air despite the summer heat that would undoubtedly build as the day progressed. Emma rose early, eager to begin her first day at Martha Wilson's dress shop. She found Xander already awake, brewing coffee on the small stove. "Good morning," he greeted, offering her a steaming cup. "Did you sleep well?" "Surprisingly so." Emma accepted the coffee gratefully. "And you?" "Well enough." He nodded toward a plate of biscuits on the table. "I'm afraid my cooking skills are limited, but these should be edible." Emma took a tentative bite and found the biscuit surprisingly good. "You've hidden talents, Mr. Zane." "Survival skills," he corrected with a slight smile. "A man traveling alone learns to manage or goes hungry." They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes before Emma asked, "What are your plans for today?" "I need to check if there's a response to my telegram. Then I have some inquiries to make regarding Xavier Zimmerman." Emma looked up sharply. "Whatever for?" "The man defrauded you and others in this town. That may constitute a crime worth investigating." Xander's expression was carefully neutral. "Consider it professional curiosity." "I'd rather put that entire episode behind me," Emma said firmly. "As you wish." "But if he's making a habit of this, other women could be at risk." Emma hadn't considered that possibility. "I suppose you're right. Just be discreet, please. I've already attracted enough attention in this town." "Of course." Xander rose from the table. "I'll walk you to the dress shop before I begin my errands." "That's not necessary. Humor me," he interrupted gently. "A gentleman escorts his wife even if the marriage is unconventional." Emma couldn't argue with his logic, especially when they were trying to present themselves as a normal married couple to the town. They walked together down the dusty Main Street, maintaining a respectable distance while still appearing as a couple. Emma was conscious of curious glances from townsfolk going about their morning business. "People are staring," she murmured. "You're new, beautiful, and there's been drama surrounding your arrival," Xander replied matter-of-factly. "Their interest will fade once something more exciting happens." Emma nearly stumbled at his casual mention of her being beautiful, but she recovered quickly. "Let's hope that's soon, then." When they reached Martha's shop, Xander tipped his hat. "I'll return at lunchtime. Good luck with your first day." "Thank you." Emma watched him walk away before taking a deep breath and entering the shop. Martha greeted her warmly and immediately set her to work sorting a new shipment of fabrics. As the morning progressed, Emma demonstrated her skill with various stitches and techniques, impressing the older woman with her expertise. "Where did you learn such fine needlework?" Martha asked as she examined a particularly delicate hem Emma had completed. "My mother taught me the basics before she passed. Then at school we had daily lessons." Emma smoothed the fabric carefully. "I always found it soothing." "Well, you've certainly proved your worth," Martha declared. "The position is yours if you want it." "Thank you, Mrs. Wilson." "I accept gratefully." As they worked together, Martha casually inquired about Emma's sudden marriage. "Not that it's my business, mind you, but folks are curious. One day you're set to marry Xavier Zimmerman, the next you're Mrs. Xander Zane. Quite the coincidence, those similar names." Emma had prepared for such questions. Mr. Zimmerman's true character became apparent upon my arrival. Fortunately, Mr. Zane was an acquaintance from back east who happened to be passing through. When he learned of my situation, he offered a more honorable alternative. It wasn't entirely a lie, Emma reasoned. Xander was from the East, and he had offered an alternative to her predicament. "How romantic," Martha sighed. "Like something from a novel." "Yes, quite," Emma agreed, focusing intently on cutting a pattern to avoid further questions. The morning passed quickly, and Emma found she genuinely enjoyed the work. When Xander appeared at noon, Martha insisted they use the small room behind the shop for their lunch. "Newlyweds need privacy," she said with a knowing wink that made Emma blush furiously. Once they were alone, Emma asked in a hushed voice, "Any word from my father?" "Not yet." Xander unwrapped the sandwiches he'd brought. "But I did learn something about Zimmerman. He's done this before in at least 2 other towns. Promises marriage to women with some means, then disappears with whatever valuables or money he can get." Emma's stomach tightened. "I was fortunate then. I had little for him to steal." "Accept your trust," Xander said quietly. "That's no small thing." Their eyes met briefly, and Emma felt an unexpected connection, a shared understanding that surprised her. She looked away first, focusing on her food. "The sheriff has been notified," Xander continued. "Though I doubt they'll catch him. Men like that are skilled at disappearing." "Well, I've moved on," Emma said with more conviction than she felt. "Mrs. Wilson has offered me permanent employment. I start earning wages tomorrow." "That's excellent news." Xander's smile seemed genuine. "You're adapting remarkably well. Necessity is a powerful motivator." Emma brushed crumbs from her skirt. "Will you continue your detective work while we're married?" "To some extent. I've requested local assignments from the agency. Nothing that would take me far from Timber Creek for extended periods." Emma was touched by his consideration, though she reminded herself that their arrangement was purely practical. Xander needed to maintain the appearance of a settled husband to satisfy her father, just as she needed the protection his name provided. "You don't need to limit yourself on my account," she said. "I'm perfectly capable of managing on my own." "I have no doubt of that," Xander replied. "But a husband who immediately abandons his new wife would raise questions. Besides, this territory has plenty of work for a Pinkerton detective. Train robberies, cattle rustling, land disputes, no shortage of cases." As they finished their lunch, Emma found herself curious about Xander's past cases, and he shared a few of his more interesting assignments. She was surprised to discover he had a gift for storytelling, bringing the adventures to life with his deep, expressive voice. When it was time to return to work, Emma found herself reluctant to end their conversation. "Will you be home for dinner?" she asked, then immediately felt foolish for the domestic question. "I should be," Xander replied, seemingly unaware of her discomfort. "I could bring something from the hotel restaurant if you'd like." "No need, I can cook." Emma straightened her apron. "It's the least I can do, considering all you've done for me." Something flickered in Xander's eyes, surprise, perhaps, or appreciation. Then I look forward to it, he said simply. The afternoon passed in a blur of customers and sewing. By the time Emma walked home, the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the dusty street. She stopped at the general store to purchase ingredients for dinner, ignoring the whispers that followed her through the aisles. At home, she set about preparing a simple but hearty meal of beef stew and biscuits. The domestic activity was soothing, giving her time to reflect on the strange turn her life had taken. Just as she was setting the table, the front door opened, and Xander stepped inside. "Something smells wonderful," he said, removing his hat and coat. "Just a simple stew," Emma replied, suddenly shy about her cooking. "Nothing fancy." After weeks of trail food and hotel meals, home cooking is the finest luxury I can imagine. He washed his hands at the basin, then joined her at the table. As they ate, Xander shared news from town. A new shipment of goods had arrived at the general store. The stagecoach had brought mail from back east, and the local saloon was hosting a dance on Saturday night. A dance. Emma's interest was piqued. In Philadelphia, dances had been elaborate affairs with strict protocols and expectations. She wondered how different a frontier dance might be. "Would you like to attend?" Xander asked, noticing her interest. "It would be a good opportunity for you to meet more of the townspeople." "I'd like that," Emma admitted, "though I have nothing suitable to wear. Perhaps Mrs. Wilson could help with that." "Perhaps." Emma served him a second helping of stew. "Was there any word from my father today?" Xander hesitated just long enough for Emma to know the news wasn't good. "Yes, his reply came this afternoon." "And," she prompted when he didn't continue, he expressed disappointment in your choice to marry without his blessing. He questioned the suddenness of our union and my suitability as a husband. Emma felt a familiar mix of hurt and anger. Of course he did. Nothing I do will ever meet with his approval. "There's more," Xander said gently. "He's coming to Wyoming." Emma nearly dropped her spoon. "What? When?" "The telegram didn't specify, but I would guess within a few weeks. He wants to assess the situation personally, as he put it." "This is a disaster," Emma whispered, pushing her plate away as her appetite vanished. "He'll see through our arrangement immediately." "Not necessarily." Xander reached across the table, stopping just short of touching her hand. "By the time he arrives, we'll have established ourselves as a married couple in the eyes of the town. We'll simply need to be convincing." "Convincing how?" Emma asked, suddenly aware of all the ways their arrangement fell short of a real marriage. "We'll have to appear comfortable with each other, affectionate even." Xander's expression remained calm, but Emma noticed a slight tension in his jaw. "It won't be easy, but it's not impossible." Emma stood and began clearing the dishes, needing physical activity to process this development. "My father is extremely perceptive. He built his fortune by reading people and situations accurately." Xander rose to help her, taking the dishes to the wash basin. "Then we'll need to practice." "Starting now." "Practice what exactly?" "Being married." Xander turned to face her. "May I?" Before Emma could ask what he meant, he stepped closer and gently tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear. The simple gesture, performed with such natural ease, made her breath catch. "Small touches," he explained, his voice low. "The kind of familiar gestures married couples share without thinking. We need them to become second nature." Emma nodded, unable to find her voice for a moment. "Yes, I see. That makes sense. We should also use endearments occasionally. Nothing excessive, but enough to be convincing." "Like what?" Emma asked, genuinely curious. Xander considered. "Whatever feels natural, dear perhaps, or darling in more private moments." "I've never used such terms before," Emma admitted. "Nor have I," Xander said with a small smile. "We can practice those as well." As they finished cleaning up from dinner, Emma was acutely aware of Xander's proximity in the small kitchen. They moved around each other carefully, like dancers learning a new routine. Occasionally, their hands would brush, or he would place a gentle touch at the small of her back as he moved past her. Each contact sent a small jolt through Emma's system, a reaction she tried to ignore. This is all pretense, she reminded herself firmly. A necessary performance for her father's benefit. Yet as they sat on the porch later, watching the stars emerge in the vast Wyoming sky, Emma couldn't help but wonder if the warmth spreading through her chest was entirely due to their play acting, or if something more complicated was developing between them. The next few days fell into a surprisingly comfortable routine. Emma worked at Martha's dress shop during the day, gradually meeting more of Timber Creek's residents as they came in for fittings or repairs. Xander divided his time between local detective work and establishing their presence as a married couple in town. They took their evening meals together, sharing the events of their days and slowly building a foundation of knowledge about each other that would withstand her father's scrutiny. By Friday, Emma had received her first payment from Martha and used part of it to purchase ingredients for a special dinner. She wanted to prove, perhaps more to herself than to Xander, that she was capable of creating a proper home, even if their marriage was temporary. "Something smells amazing," Xander said as he entered the house that evening, hanging his hat on the peg by the door, a gesture that had already become familiar. "Roast chicken with potatoes and carrots," Emma replied, pleased by his evident appreciation. "And apple pie for dessert." Xander's eyebrows rose. "You've been busy. What's the occasion?" "I received my first wages today." Emma smoothed her apron, feeling unexpectedly nervous. "I wanted to celebrate my small step toward independence." A worthy celebration indeed. Xander's smile warmed his usually guarded features. "And perfect timing. I have news as well." They sat down to dinner, and Emma served the carefully prepared meal, watching anxiously as Xander took his first bite. "This is excellent," he declared, and the genuine pleasure in his voice made Emma flush with pride. "Thank you. What's your news?" "I received word that your father has left Philadelphia. He's likely to arrive within 2 weeks." Xander watched her reaction carefully. "Are you ready for that?" Emma set down her fork. "I'm not sure anyone is ever ready to face Henry Foster when he's displeased. But I won't let him dictate my life again." "Good." Xander nodded approvingly. "Also, I've been offered a case here in Wyoming. The owners of the Double R Ranch have reported cattle rustling. They've asked me to investigate. Will it take you away from town?" Emma tried to keep her voice neutral, though the thought of being alone in the house unsettled her more than she wanted to admit. "Only for short periods, a day or 2 at most." He studied her expression. "Will you be all right on your own?" "Of course," Emma replied quickly. "I lived alone in Philadelphia after leaving my father's house. I'm hardly helpless." "I never suggested you were." Xander's tone was gentle. "But this isn't Philadelphia. The territories have different dangers." "I'm aware." Emma softened her voice. "I appreciate your concern, but I'll be fine." "When do you leave?" "Monday morning, if that suits you." "It does." Emma hesitated, then added, "Tomorrow is the dance at the Saloon. Will we still attend?" "If you wish to." Xander's eyes held hers. "It would be good for us to be seen together socially before your father arrives." The mention of her father brought Emma back to the reality of their situation. Their increasing comfort with each other, the domestic routines they were establishing, all of it was in service of maintaining their charade. "Yes, of course," she agreed, focusing on her food. "For appearance's sake." After dinner, they sat in the small parlor, a lamp casting warm light over the room. Emma had begun work on a new dress for herself, using fabric Martha had allowed her to purchase at cost. Xander read through documents related to his upcoming case, occasionally making notes in a small leather-bound book. The quiet domesticity of the scene struck Emma suddenly. This was what a real marriage might feel like: comfortable silence, shared space, the knowledge of another person's presence. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine that their arrangement was genuine, that the man sitting across from her was truly her husband in every sense. The thought sent a flutter of something dangerous through her chest. Emma bent her head over her sewing, pushing away such fanciful notions. Their marriage had a clear purpose and a definite end point. Allowing herself to forget that would only lead to heartache. "You're very quiet," Xander observed, looking up from his papers. "Just concentrating on this seam," Emma replied, not quite meeting his eyes. "It's rather difficult in this light. Would you like me to adjust the lamp?" "No, thank you. I think I'll retire for the night." Emma gathered her sewing and stood. "What time should we plan to leave for the dance tomorrow?" 8 o'clock, Xander suggested. "That should give us time to get ready after you return from the shop." Emma nodded. "Good night, then." "Good night, Emma." The way he said her name, soft, almost intimate, made her pause at the doorway to her bedroom. "Xander," she said, turning back. "Yes." The question that had been on her mind all evening finally found voice. "Are we doing the right thing? This deception?" Xander set aside his papers and considered her question seriously. "I believe we are. Your father gave you no choice but to flee. Zimmerman betrayed your trust. This arrangement gives you time and protection to build the life you want." He paused. "Is that not worth a temporary falsehood? Put that way, Emma couldn't argue. "Yes, I suppose it is. Thank you for reminding me." As she closed her bedroom door behind her, Emma wondered why his reassurance left her feeling both comforted and strangely disappointed. Saturday morning dawned bright and clear. Emma worked a half day at the dress shop, then hurried home to prepare for the dance. Martha had helped her alter one of the shop's ready-made dresses, a lovely creation of deep blue cotton with delicate white piping. It was simpler than the elaborate gowns Emma had worn to Philadelphia balls, but it suited her new life and the frontier setting. She bathed and washed her hair, then spent considerable time arranging it in a style that was both elegant and appropriate for a married woman. As she pinned the last curl in place, Emma studied her reflection in the small mirror above her dresser. There was a healthy color in her cheeks that hadn't been there in Philadelphia, and her eyes seemed brighter somehow. The West agreed with her, Emma realized. Despite the uncertainty of her situation, she felt more alive here than she had in years. A knock at the front door interrupted her thoughts. Emma frowned, wondering who would be calling in the late afternoon. She heard Xander's footsteps crossing to answer it, followed by the murmur of male voices. Curiosity drew her to her bedroom door, which she opened a crack to listen. "Absolutely certain," Xander was saying, his tone more tense than Emma had ever heard it. "Rode in not an hour ago," replied a voice Emma didn't recognize. "Stopped at the hotel, asking questions about the new Pinkerton man and his bride." "Thank you for the warning, Sheriff. I appreciate it. Thought you should know, considering your unusual situation. Not that it's my business how quickly you two got hitched." Emma's heart began to race. Had her father arrived early? She opened her door wider, stepping into the hallway just as Xander was closing the front door. "What is it?" she asked, noting the tension in his shoulders. "Who was that?" Xander turned, his expression grave. "Xavier Zimmerman has returned to Timber Creek." Emma felt as if the floor had dropped away beneath her feet. "What? Why would he come back? I thought you said he had debts here." "Apparently he's found new courage or a new scheme." Xander guided her to a chair, his hand gentle on her elbow. "The sheriff says he's asking questions about us." "About us?" Emma repeated weakly. "Why would he care who I married after he abandoned me?" I don't know, Xander admitted. But I intend to find out. In the meantime, I think we should reconsider attending the dance tonight. Emma's initial impulse was to agree to hide away until Zimmerman left town again, but something in her rebelled at the thought of allowing that man to dictate her actions once more. No, she said firmly, we should go as planned. I won't cower in fear because that scoundrel has returned. Xander studied her with surprise and what looked like admiration. Are you certain? There's no shame in being cautious, I'm certain. Emma straightened her shoulders. Besides, if he's asking questions about us, appearing together publicly will only reinforce our story. After a moment, Xander nodded. Very well, but stay close to me at all times. I don't trust Zimmerman's intentions. Nor do I, Emma agreed, but I won't let him ruin our evening. Our evening. The words slipped out naturally, as if the dance were truly a social outing for a happily married couple, rather than another performance in their elaborate charade. From Xander's expression, he'd noticed the phrasing too, but he made no comment. I'll get ready then, he said, retreating to his own room. Emma returned to her preparations with renewed determination. If Xavier Zimmerman thought he could intimidate her, he was sorely mistaken. She was no longer the naive young woman who had stepped off the stagecoach with dreams of a new life. She was Emma Zane now, even if the name was temporary, and she would face whatever challenges came her way with dignity and courage. When Xander emerged from his room an hour later, Emma's breath caught in her throat. He was dressed in a clean black suit with a crisp white shirt and string tie. His dark hair was neatly combed, and he'd shaved his usual stubble. He looked handsome and distinguished every inch the successful detective and respectable husband. You look very nice, she managed, suddenly conscious of her own appearance. Xander's gaze traveled over her, his expression warming. And you look beautiful, Emma. That color suits you. The compliment, delivered with such simple sincerity, brought a flush to her cheeks. Thank you. He offered his arm with a slight bow. Shall we, Mrs. Zane? Emma placed her hand on his arm, feeling the solid strength beneath the fabric of his suit. Yes, let's. They walked through the twilit streets toward the saloon, which had been temporarily transformed for the dance. The usual gambling tables had been pushed aside to create a dance floor, and lanterns hung from the rafters, casting a warm glow over the scene. A small band was setting up on a makeshift stage, a fiddle player, a man with a banjo, and another with a harmonica. As they entered, Emma was aware of curious glances and whispered comments. It seemed the news of Xavier Zimmerman's return had spread, adding another layer of drama to her already gossip-worthy situation. Ignore them, Xander murmured close to her ear, his breath warm against her skin. We're here to enjoy ourselves. Emma nodded, though her eyes couldn't help scanning the room for any sign of Zimmerman. She didn't see him among the growing crowd, which was a relief. Martha Wilson bustled over, resplendent in a purple dress with matching ribbons in her gray hair. Emma, dear, don't you look lovely? And Mr. Zayn, so handsome. She lowered her voice to a stage whisper. Have you heard who's back in town? Yes, Mrs. Wilson, we're aware, Emma replied, keeping her voice steady. Well, don't you worry about that snake, Martha declared loyally. Anyone can see you've traded up. She winked at Xander, who had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. Thank you for your support, Mrs. Wilson, he said. Would you excuse us? I'd like to introduce my wife to some of the townspeople. Of course, Martha patted Emma's arm. Enjoy yourselves, dears. As Xander led her through the crowd, Emma was introduced to the sheriff, the town doctor and his wife, the banker, and several ranchers and their families. Everyone was welcoming, if curious, and Emma found herself relaxing slightly as the evening progressed. When the music began, Xander turned to her with a questioning look. Would you care to dance? I'd like that, Emma replied, surprising herself with how much she meant it. He led her onto the floor and drew her into his arms for a simple waltz. They moved together with unexpected ease, as if they'd danced together many times before. Emma was conscious of his hand at her waist, the slight pressure of his fingers against the fabric of her dress, the clean scent of soap and aftershave that surrounded him. You dance very well, she observed, needing to break the intimate silence between them. My mother insisted I learn, Xander replied, a hint of fond remembrance in his voice. She said no son of hers would step on a lady's toes at a social gathering. She sounds like a wise woman. She was. His expression softened with memory. You would have liked her, I think, and she would have approved of you. The thought that Xander's mother might have approved of her as a daughter-in-law touched Emma deeply, even though their marriage was merely an arrangement. Thank you for saying that. They danced in silence for a few moments more, each lost in their own thoughts. Then Xander's body suddenly tensed, his arm tightening slightly around her waist. Don't turn around, he said quietly, but Zimmerman just walked in. Emma's heart began to race, but she forced herself to keep moving smoothly with the music. What is he doing? Watching us, Xander replied, his voice low. Stay calm. We'll finish this dance and then find a less conspicuous spot. They completed the waltz, and Xander immediately guided Emma toward a corner of the room where several couples were gathered in conversation. He positioned himself so that his body partially shielded her from view. Mrs. Zane, a voice drawled from behind them. Or should I still call you Miss Foster? Emma turned slowly to face Xavier Zimmerman. He was much as she remembered, tall and fair-haired, with a charming smile that no longer held any power over her. Now she could see the coldness in his blue eyes, the calculation behind his handsome facade. Mr. Zimmerman, she acknowledged coolly. How surprising to see you back in Timber Creek. I understood you had pressing business elsewhere. Zimmerman's smile didn't reach his eyes. I found I'd left something important behind. His gaze slid to Xander. Though it seems you wasted no time finding a replacement groom. I believe you've mistaken the situation, Xander said, his voice deceptively calm though Emma could feel the tension radiating from him. I'm no replacement. Emma and I have known each other for years. Really? Zimmerman raised an eyebrow skeptically. How convenient that you happened to be in Timber Creek just when she needed a husband. Fortunate timing, Xander agreed, his expression impassive. Now, if you'll excuse us, I'd like to dance with my wife. Of course. Zimmerman made a mocking bow. Though I wonder what your father would think of this hasty union, Emma. Henry Foster has always been particular about his daughter's suitors. The mention of her father sent a chill through Emma. How did Zimmerman know her father's name? She had never mentioned it in her letters. Before she could question him, Xander had guided her back onto the dance floor, his arm protective around her waist. How does he know my father? Emma whispered, alarm evident in her voice. I'm not sure, Xander admitted, his expression grim, but I intend to find out. For now, let's focus on enjoying the rest of our evening. We won't give him the satisfaction of seeing us upset. They danced several more sets, making a point of smiling and appearing completely at ease. When they weren't dancing, they mingled with the townspeople, Xander keeping Emma's hand firmly in his. To anyone watching, they appeared to be exactly what they claimed, a happily married couple enjoying a social evening. But Emma was acutely aware of Zimmerman's gaze following them around the room. He made no further attempt to approach them, but his presence cast a shadow over what should have been a pleasant night. As the evening drew to a close, Xander leaned close to whisper in her ear. Ready to go home, darling. The endearment, spoken for the benefit of those around them, nevertheless sent a shiver through Emma. Yes, dear, she replied, matching his tone. They said their goodbyes and stepped out into the cool night air. Xander immediately tucked Emma's hand into the crook of his arm, walking briskly away from the saloon. "You think he's following us?" Emma asked, resisting the urge to look over her shoulder. "Possibly. Let's not give him the chance." Xander increased their pace slightly. "We need to talk about what happened tonight, but not here." When they reached their rented house, Xander checked each room before closing all the curtains and lighting the lamps. Only then did he remove his jacket and loosen his tie, some of the tension leaving his shoulders. "How did he know about my father?" Emma asked immediately, unable to contain her worry any longer. Xander ran a hand through his hair, disturbing its neat arrangement. "I've been thinking about that. There are a few possibilities, none of them good. Tell me." "He could have intercepted correspondence between your father and myself. He could have contacts in Philadelphia who provided him information. Or, Emma prompted when he hesitated, or he could be working with your father." Emma sank onto the sofa, her knees suddenly weak. "That's impossible. My father would never associate with someone like Zimmerman." "Are you certain?" Xander sat beside her, his expression serious. "Your father was desperate to find you, desperate enough to hire a Pinkerton detective. Might he not also have hired someone closer to the situation?" "To what end?" Emma shook her head in disbelief. "If my father hired Zimmerman to find me, why would Zimmerman have posed as a potential husband? To gain your trust. To ensure you stayed in one place long enough for your father to reach you." Xander's voice was gentle, but his words struck Emma like physical blows. "No," she whispered. "It can't be true." "I hope I'm wrong," Xander said, "but we need to consider all possibilities. Zimmerman's return and his knowledge of your father are too coincidental otherwise." Emma stood abruptly, needing to move. She paced the small parlor, mind racing. "If what you're suggesting is true, then my father orchestrated this entire situation. My heartbreak, my abandonment, all of it a manipulation to control me." "It's only a theory," Xander reminded her. "And regardless of Zimmerman's connection to your father, our arrangement remains unchanged. You're legally my wife until we choose to dissolve the marriage. That gives you protection and time." Emma stopped pacing and looked at him, really looked at him. In the warm lamplight, Xander's face showed genuine concern, and something else, a determination that reassured her. Whatever Zimmerman's game, whatever her father's involvement, this man was on her side. "Thank you," she said softly. "For the dance, for protecting me tonight, for everything." Xander stood and approached her slowly, as if afraid she might flee. When he reached her, he gently took her hands in his. "I gave you my word, Emma. I intend to keep it." They stood there for a long moment, hands clasped, eyes locked in silent communication. Something was shifting between them, something neither had anticipated when they'd entered into their practical arrangement. Finally, Xander released her hands and stepped back slightly. "We should get some rest. Tomorrow, I'll begin investigating Zimmerman's connections and intentions." "Yes, of course." Emma moved toward her bedroom door, then paused. "Xander?" "Yes, be careful. Zimmerman may be more dangerous than we thought." A small smile touched Xander's lips. "I've faced worse, I assure you. Good night, Emma. Good night." As Emma prepared for bed, her mind replayed the events of the evening, the dancing, Zimmerman's appearance, the comfort of Xander's steady presence. Their pretend marriage was becoming increasingly complicated, not just because of external threats, but because of the unexpected feelings developing between them. Emma tried to dismiss these thoughts as she extinguished her lamp. Their arrangement had clear boundaries and a definite endpoint. Any attachment she formed would only lead to heartache when they inevitably parted ways. Yet as she drifted toward sleep, Emma couldn't help remembering the feeling of Xander's arms around her as they danced, and the look in his eyes when he'd promised to protect her. whatever their marriage lacked in traditional foundations. It was building something real between them, something neither had anticipated or sought, but which might prove more powerful than any contract they'd signed. Sunday passed quietly, with Xander leaving early to make inquiries about Zimmerman while Emma attended church services. Many of the townspeople greeted her warmly, having seen her at the dance the night before. Emma found herself genuinely enjoying the sense of community that was developing around her, even as she worried about Zimmerman's presence in town. When she returned home, she found Xander in the parlor, studying a series of papers spread across the table. "Any news?" she asked, removing her bonnet. "Some," he replied, rubbing his eyes tiredly. "Zimmerman left Timber Creek late last night, according to the livery stable owner. He rented a horse and rode south." "South?" Emma frowned. "Toward Denver, possibly. Or he could be heading to one of the ranches in that direction." Xander gathered the papers into a neat stack. "I've sent telegrams to some contacts, asking for information on his background and recent movements. You still believe he might be working for my father?" Xander's expression was guarded. "I'm not ruling it out. The timing of his return is suspicious, especially with your father on his way to Wyoming." The mention of her father reminded Emma of the limited time they had to prepare for his arrival. "Speaking of which, we should continue our practice, being a convincing couple, of course." Xander stood, stretching slightly. "What did you have in mind?" "Well, at the dance when you called me darling." Emma felt her cheeks warm at the memory. It seemed natural. "Perhaps we should use such endearments more frequently to become comfortable with them." A sensible suggestion. Xander moved closer, his expression thoughtful. "And what about physical affection? Your father will expect to see some evidence of attachment between us." Emma's heart quickened at his proximity. "Yes, I suppose he would." "May I?" Xander asked, just as he had that first evening when he'd tucked her hair behind her ear. At her nod, he gently placed his hands on her shoulders, then slid one hand up to cup her cheek. The touch was tender, intimate in a way that made Emma's breath catch. "This is the way a husband might touch his wife," he said softly. "Casual affection given without thought." Emma leaned slightly into his touch, her eyes never leaving his. And how might a wife respond? "She might do this," Xander murmured, drawing her closer until their bodies were nearly touching. "Or this." He bent his head slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. Emma knew she should stop this. Their arrangement was meant to be practical, not emotional. Yet she found herself rising on her toes, meeting him halfway as his lips brushed against hers in a kiss so gentle it was barely more than a whisper. When he pulled back, Emma saw her own confusion mirrored in his eyes. This was no longer just practice, they both knew it. "Xander," a sharp knock at the door interrupted whatever she had been about to say. They stepped apart quickly, the moment broken. "Are you expecting anyone?" Xander asked, his voice rough. Emma shook her head, smoothing her skirts with trembling hands. Xander moved to the door, one hand moving instinctively toward the gun he wasn't currently wearing. He opened it cautiously, then relaxed slightly. "Mrs. Wilson," he greeted. "This is a surprise." Martha bustled in, looking flustered. "I'm sorry to interrupt your Sunday, dears, but I thought you should know immediately." She turned to Emma. "A telegram came for Mr. Zane at the general store. Since it was marked urgent, Mr. Peterson asked me to deliver it, knowing I knew where you lived." Xander accepted the folded paper with a nod of thanks. "I appreciate your bringing this, Mrs. Wilson." "Not at all, not at all." Martha glanced between them, noting their flushed faces and slightly disheveled appearance. "Oh my, I have interrupted something, haven't I? I'll just be on my way." "Don't forget, Emma, we have that large order to complete tomorrow." After Martha left, Xander opened the telegram, his expression growing increasingly grave as he read. "What is it?" Emma asked, concern replacing her earlier embarrassment. "Your father," Xander replied, handing her the telegram. "He's arriving day after tomorrow, and he's bringing someone with him." Emma scanned the brief message, her stomach sinking. "Arriving Timber Creek Tuesday. Stop bringing family lawyer. Stop expect full explanation of situation. Stop Henry Foster a lawyer," Emma whispered, looking up at Xander. "He's bringing a lawyer. It seems your father has doubts about our marriage." Xander's voice was calm, but Emma could see the tension in his jaw. "This complicates matters. What will we do?" "The only thing we can do, convince them our marriage is genuine." Xander ran a hand through his hair. "I should postpone my work at the Double R Ranch." "No," Emma said firmly. "You can't neglect your responsibilities because of my father. Besides, a devoted husband would still attend to his business." "A devoted husband wouldn't leave his wife to face her father alone," Xander countered. "I won't be alone. I'll be working at the dress shop, surrounded by people who know me as Mrs. Zane." Emma squared her shoulders. "Go to the ranch as planned. Just be back by Wednesday if you can." Xander studied her with admiration. "You're a remarkable woman, Emma Foster Zane." The use of her full name, with his surname added, sent a strange thrill through Emma. "And you're a good man, Xander Zane. Better than I expected when we made our arrangement." The air between them seemed charged with unspoken feelings. The kiss they had shared moments ago hung in the balance, neither acknowledged nor forgotten. "About what happened before Martha arrived." Xander began. "Practice," Emma said quickly, though she knew it had been more than that. "For my father's visit, it was a good idea." Something flickered in Xander's eyes, disappointment perhaps, but he nodded. "Of course, we should continue preparing. Your father won't be easily fooled." As they spent the remainder of the day reviewing the details of their fabricated history, Emma tried to focus on the practical aspects of their deception. But her mind kept returning to that brief, gentle kiss, and the way Xander's touch had made her feel not like a woman in a business arrangement, but like a woman truly desired. Whatever happened when her father arrived, Emma knew one thing with certainty. Her feelings for Xander Zane were becoming dangerously real, and that could be more dangerous to her heart than any threat Xavier Zimmerman or Henry Foster might pose. Monday morning arrived with a chill in the air that hinted at the approaching autumn. Emma woke early to prepare breakfast before Xander departed for the Double R Ranch. As she stirred batter for pancakes, she heard him moving about in his room, preparing for the journey. When he emerged, Xander was dressed in practical riding clothes, with a gun belt fastened around his waist and a duster draped over his arm. He looked every inch the capable Pinkerton detective, rugged, confident, and undeniably handsome. "Something smells wonderful," he said, hanging his duster on a peg by the door. "Just pancakes," Emma replied, trying to sound casual despite her awareness of how domestic the scene must appear. "I thought you should have a proper meal before you leave." "Thank you." Xander poured himself coffee from the pot on the stove. "I've been thinking about your father's visit." "As have I," Emma admitted, flipping a pancake with perhaps more force than necessary. "I'm concerned about the lawyer." "It's a standard intimidation tactic," Xander said. "Your father wants us off balance, wondering what legal challenge he might present. You think he'll try to have our marriage annulled?" The thought sent a spike of panic through Emma, though she wasn't entirely sure why. Their marriage was meant to be temporary anyway. He might. Xander accepted the plate she handed him. "But our marriage is legally binding. 2 witnesses signed the certificate, and there was no coercion involved." "Except the coercion of circumstance," Emma murmured, sitting across from him with her own plate. Xander's expression softened. "Emma, regardless of your father's intentions, I won't let him force you into anything you don't want, even if that means maintaining our marriage longer than we initially planned." The sincerity in his voice touched her deeply. "Thank you, though I hope it won't come to that." They ate in companionable silence for a few minutes before Xander spoke again. "I should be back by Wednesday morning at the latest. If your father arrives before then, tell him I've been called away on urgent business but will return shortly." "I will." Emma hesitated, then added, "Please be careful. Cattle rustlers can be dangerous." "I'm always careful," Xander assured her with a small smile, "and I have extra motivation to return safely now." The implication in his words hung between them, neither quite brave enough to examine it closely. After breakfast, Emma packed some food for Xander's journey while he saddled his horse at the nearby livery. When he returned to collect the provisions, an awkward moment arose as they stood at the door, uncertain how to say goodbye. In a real marriage, a kiss would be natural. In their arrangement, the boundaries were less clear, especially after yesterday's moment of unexpected intimacy. Finally, Xander leaned forward and pressed a gentle kiss to Emma's cheek. "Take care, Emma. I'll return as soon as I can." "Safe travels," she replied, fighting the urge to turn her face and meet his lips with hers. As she watched him ride away, Emma felt an ache in her chest that had nothing to do with fear of her father's arrival. In less than 2 weeks, Xander Zane had become important to her in ways she hadn't anticipated. The prospect of eventually ending their marriage once so clearly the right course now filled her with a sense of loss. With a sigh, Emma turned back to the house. There was no time for such reflections. She had work to do at Martha's shop, and preparations to make for her father's visit. Whatever feelings might be developing between her and Xander, they would have to wait. The dress shop was unusually busy that day, with several customers coming in specifically to meet the new Mrs. Zane. Emma realized that her sudden marriage had made her an object of curiosity in the small town. She answered questions about her courtship with Xander as vaguely as possible, sticking to the story they had constructed without elaborating unnecessarily. "Such a handsome couple, Mrs. Peterson," the general store owner's wife, commented as Emma fitted her for a new dress. "And so clearly in love. The way he watched you at the dance, well, it was positively romantic." Emma blushed, focusing on pinning the hem. "We're very happy," she said simply. "And to think you almost married that scoundrel Zimmerman." Mrs. Peterson shuddered dramatically. "Providence was watching over you, my dear." By the end of the day, Emma was exhausted from maintaining her composure through similar conversations. As she walked home alone, she couldn't help glancing over her shoulder occasionally, half expecting to see Xavier Zimmerman lurking in the shadows. The knowledge that her father would arrive the next day only added to her unease. The house felt emptier without Xander's presence. Emma prepared a simple dinner for herself and ate it in silence, missing the conversation and companionship she'd grown accustomed to in such a short time. She tried to distract herself by working on the dress she was making, but her thoughts kept straying to Xander at the ranch and to her father's impending arrival. When a knock came at the door, Emma started violently, pricking her finger with the needle. She set aside her sewing and approached cautiously, remembering Xander's warnings about Zimmerman. "Who is it?" she called through the closed door. "Sheriff Dawson, Mrs. Zane, just checking in on you, seeing as your husband's away." Relief flooded through Emma as she recognized the sheriff's voice. She opened the door to find the weathered lawman standing on her porch, hat in hand. "Good evening, Sheriff. Is everything all right?" "Just fine, madam. Mr. Zane asked me to look in on you while he's at the Double R. Said your father's coming to visit tomorrow." Emma smiled gratefully. "That's right. Thank you for checking on me." "No trouble at all." The sheriff shifted slightly. Also thought you should know, there's been another sighting of Zimmerman. He was seen riding back into town this afternoon. Emma's smile faded. I see, did he? Say what his business was. Not to me, he didn't. He's taken a room at the hotel. Sheriff Dawson's expression was sympathetic. If he bothers you, Mrs. Zane, you come straight to me. Mr. Zane made it clear your safety was his primary concern. Thank you, Sheriff. I appreciate that. After the sheriff left, Emma double-checked all the locks on the doors and windows. The thought of Zimmerman in town, with Xander away and her father arriving tomorrow, left her feeling vulnerable despite the sheriff's assurances. She slept poorly that night, waking at every creak and settling of the house. By morning, she was tired but resolute. She wouldn't let fear dictate her actions. She dressed carefully in one of her new dresses, a modest but flattering sage green that complemented her eyes, and arranged her hair in a style that was both fashionable and appropriate for a married woman. Martha greeted her sympathetically when she arrived at the shop. You look tired, dear. Worried about your father's visit, a bit, Emma admitted. We've been estranged since I left Philadelphia. Well, he'll find you happily married and establishing yourself in a respectable position, Martha said firmly. What more could a father want for his daughter? What indeed, Emma thought. The problem was that Henry Foster had very specific plans for his only child, and none of them involved her finding happiness on her own terms. The morning passed in a blur of customers and sewing. Emma kept glancing at the clock, knowing the afternoon stage would bring her father to Timber Creek. She had decided to meet him at the hotel rather than having him come to the house. A public setting seemed safer for their first encounter in months. At 3 o'clock, Martha shooed her out the door. Go on, dear. Better to face him directly than sit here worrying. Emma walked to the hotel with her head held high, though her stomach was tied in knots. She took a seat in the lobby, positioned where she could see the front entrance, and waited. The stage was due at 3:30, but it was often late on the rough frontier roads. At 4:15, the distant sound of the stagecoach announced its arrival. Emma clasped her hands tightly in her lap, fighting the urge to flee. A few minutes later, the hotel doors swung open, and Henry Foster strode in, followed by a thin man carrying a leather document case. Emma's father looked exactly as she remembered, tall and imposing, with silver-streaked dark hair and piercing blue eyes that missed nothing. He was dressed impeccably in a tailored suit that set him apart from the other travelers and townspeople. His gaze swept the lobby and landed on Emma with laser-like intensity. "Father," Emma said, rising to greet him with what composure she could muster. "Emma." His voice was cool as he approached. "You look well, if somewhat rustically attired." "Wyoming territory is hardly Philadelphia," she replied, refusing to be cowed by his criticism. "Welcome to Timber Creek." Henry Foster looked around the modest hotel lobby with barely concealed disdain. "So this is where you've chosen to establish yourself. Interesting decision." "It suits me," Emma said simply. "Will you introduce your companion, of course? Emma, this is Mr. Everett from the law firm of Everett and Palmer. Mr. Everett, my daughter, Mrs. Zane, apparently." The lawyer bowed slightly. "A pleasure, Mrs. Zane. Mr. Everett." Emma nodded politely, then turned back to her father. "I assume you'll want to rest after your journey before we discuss whatever legal matters you've brought Mr. Everett to address." "Always direct," Henry commented with a thin smile. "Very well. We'll freshen up and meet you for dinner at 6. I trust there's an establishment in this town that serves edible food." "The hotel dining room is quite adequate," Emma replied, refusing to rise to his bait. "And where is your husband, Emma? I'm most eager to meet the man who has so suddenly become my son-in-law." "Xander has been called away on business. He's expected back tomorrow." Emma met her father's skeptical gaze steadily. He's a Pinkerton detective. His work occasionally requires travel. How convenient, Henry remarked dryly. Well, we shall look forward to making his acquaintance upon his return. Until dinner, then. As her father and the lawyer headed for the hotel desk to check in, Emma released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The encounter had gone better than she'd feared, though she had no illusions about what was to come. Her father hadn't traveled all this way merely to verify her well-being. She walked back to the house slowly, gathering her thoughts. Without Xander beside her, maintaining their charade would be challenging. She needed to be prepared for her father's questions, and for whatever legal challenge Mr. Everett might present. Most of all, she needed to be honest with herself about what she truly wanted. Was it freedom from her father's control? A genuine marriage, perhaps not to Xander but to someone who respected her autonomy? Or was it something more specific, a life with the man who had started as her protector and was becoming something far more important? By the time she reached the house, Emma had no clear answers, only a growing certainty that the coming days would force her to confront questions she had been avoiding since the moment Xander Zane had drawn his gun in that saloon and declared, "She's mine alone."